Battlefield 5 is absolutely one of the strangest games released by this franchise ever. Depending on when you played it, you probably have a completely different opinion of it. Some players remember it as a broken, unfinished mess that never lived up to Battlefield 1. Others remember it as one of the most immersive, best feeling Battlefield games ever made. And somehow, both of those things can be true. Because Battlefield 5 didn't just have a rough launch, it had one of the most inconsistent, frustrating, and confusing life cycles we've seen from a major FPS. And yet, buried underneath all of that, was a game that actually had the potential to be something special, maybe even something great. So the question is, what actually happened here? Why did Battlefield 5 feel like it missed the mark so hard at release? Why did it start to turn things around? And why does it now feel like a game that got abandoned right when it was finally figuring itself out? Because this isn't just a story about a bad Battlefield game. It's a story about wasted potential, and more importantly, how close Battlefield 5 came to being something very different. And stick around, because the second half of the story is where things get frustrating. That's where BF5 actually starts getting good, and then everything changes. And if you enjoy Battlefield content like this, consider subscribing. To understand Battlefield 5, you have to start with the context it released into, because it didn't launch in isolation. It launched directly after Battlefield 1, and that matters more than people realise, because Battlefield 1 wasn't just a successful game, it was one of the strongest identity-driven shooters of its generation, arguably the strongest, as I covered in my previous video. It had clarity, it had atmosphere, it had direction, and most importantly, it felt complete. So naturally, expectations for Battlefield 5 were very high. This was supposed to take the foundation and push it forwards. More polish, more depth, and more of what worked. A lot of people thought we'd be getting a World War II follow-up to Battlefield 1. That feeling, grit, the playstyle, a continuation of something that had been so successful, and clearly something that would be in high demand with fans. Instead, it immediately started off on the wrong foot. Let's talk about the reveal. This is where things go sideways very quickly. When Battlefield 5 was first shown, the mass reaction wasn't excitement like you might expect. To be kind, it could be labelled as confusion, but being realistic, it was more so outrage and disappointment. The trailer leaned heavily into a stylized version of World War II that didn't feel grounded in the same way as Battlefield 1. You had cosmetic-heavy character design, unusual visual choices, and a tone that clearly felt disconnected from what players expected. Stylistically, it's up for debate whether choices were right or wrong, but for alignment, this was a huge miss, causing a massive dip in goodwill that had been earned over years of Battlefield 1 being the active game in the franchise. So where BF1 had built trust with players, Battlefield 5 was demolishing it at the point of entry. Ironic actually, considering a feature of BF5 was building fortifications. Regardless, it's eye-opening how long it can take for developers and publishers to earn trust with a community, and then just how quickly it can be lost. But this was only the start. This was mild so far, because the real turning point was the response. The now infamous "don't like it, don't buy it" statement. These words came from Patrick Soderlund, then EA Chief Design Officer. That didn't just create backlash, it changed the relationship between the game and its audience moving forwards, and is still referenced and memed occasionally today. Because instead of feeling like players were being brought along for the journey, it felt like they were being pushed away from it, or at least that their complaints and thoughts weren't being reasonably valued. On the surface, the statement makes absolute sense. It's great advice for a consumer, but when someone from the company making the product says it, it's undeniably a bad PR move. And once the tone is set, everything after it becomes harder to recover from. The more avoidable issues that you fail to avoid, the bigger the trust mountain you have to climb. Every issue gets amplified, every mistake feels bigger, and that's exactly what happened next. Because even if you ignored the marketing issues, the actual launch of BF5 didn't do it any favors. The game felt quite staggeringly unfinished. It could even be said that that's putting it lightly. There were missing features, a lack of maps, a live service model that clearly wasn't ready, and a progression system that didn't feel fully thought through. Even basic expectations from previous Battlefield games felt like they were missing or underdeveloped. And when you're coming off Battlefield 1, that contrast becomes very obvious. From a hugely successful FPS that took the internet by storm in its early days, to this, a bad PR-soaked mess of a release, an unworthy sequel where the world wars are concerned for the Battlefield franchise. BF5 coming after BF1 just felt wrong in terms of the quality on show, and that's all without mentioning the copious amount of bugs and general poor optimization of many aspects aspects of the game. Now, a brief message from our fantastic sponsor. For those of you that love vehicle-based gameplay, War Thunder is the most comprehensive vehicle combat game ever made. It sponsors this video and is now available for free on PC, consoles, and mobile devices, letting you take command of over 2,500 tanks, planes, helicopters, and ships from 10 major nations, from biplanes and armored cars of the 1920s to fighter jets and battle tanks of the modern day. And with a game mode for every type of player, one of my favorite aspects of War Thunder. With arcade mode for fast-paced matches and simplified vehicle performance, simulator mode for the ultimate challenge, or striking a balance between intensity and authenticity with realistic mode. You can immerse yourself in the intense combat of War Thunder, experiencing incredibly detailed vehicles, realistic graphics and sound effects with no simple hitboxes with hit points. Instead, each vehicle is intricately modeled down to its individual components, such as engines, fuel tanks, weapons and crew, all susceptible to damage or disabling from enemy fire. You can join a worldwide community of 95 million players engaging in PvP battles, the perfect game for fans of military history. Sign up today for free using my links in the pinned comment or video description, and you can receive a massive bonus pack available for new and returning players that haven't played War Thunder for at least 6 months for PC and consoles, with multiple premium vehicles and an exclusive vehicle decorator, Eagle of Valor, plus 100,000 Silver Lions and 7 days of premium account. This is for a limited time only, so be quick and don't miss out. But here's the important part, and this is where the conversation gets more interesting, because underneath all of those issues, Battlefield 5 actually had some of the best core gameplay systems the franchise has ever had, at least for certain players. Let's start with the movement, because this is something players still talk about. Battlefield 5 introduced a level of fluidity that genuinely changed how the game felt moment to moment. Crouch sprinting, leaning, more responsive vaulting, the ability to roll and recover from falls, a slide ability that genuinely created a movement skill gap, as it was possible to change direction during slides, including jumps into fluid slide movements and effectively engaging gunplay whilst doing so. These weren't small changes, they completely altered how players moved through the map, and more importantly, how they approached fights. It must be said that this is a community-splitting decision though. Movement-focused players generally loved it, and of course more grounded, realism-focused players often felt it was an asinine inclusion. But regardless, movement became part of the skill gap and skill expression of BF5. So no longer just aiming or positioning, but how you navigated the battlefield itself. This was also a truly huge departure from the mostly positioning-focused Battlefield 1, where movement could be used, but to nowhere near the same degree. Once you adjusted to BF5 movement, going back to older Battlefield titles could actually feel restrictive. That's how impactful it was. And then what goes hand in hand with the movement? The gunplay. And this is where Battlefield 5 arguably shines the most, but it is very much arguable, as you'll see. Gunfights felt clean, weapons felt accurate, and there was far less reliance upon weapon mechanics and mitigating random bullet deviation or spread than in previous titles. If you lost a fight, you usually knew why. You got outplayed, you were out of position, you missed your shots. That clarity matters, because it builds trust between the player and the game. And when that trust is there, the gunplay feels fair. That is, as long as the netcode was playing fair also, a long-standing issue for the Battlefield franchise, where BF5 had what some people called super bullets, desync and all sorts of things along those lines. Regardless, and on top of that, simplistic arcadey gunplay can be great if you like that. There's a clear preference differentiator here. If the gunplay is simple and weapon usage is simple or extremely reliable, without heavy use of mechanics, then it can all get a bit beamy, which again leans into a movement focus, or the total opposite end of the spectrum. Fuck's sake. Welcome to BF5, camping or playing highly passively. If you're able to stay still and unseen, knowing your weapon is extremely easy to use, you can just wait for people to move at a vast array of ranges and then blast them away with little effort. But that aside, clearly the gunplay overall was fun for the vast majority in the relatively early stages of the game's life cycle. But here's where things start to fracture again, because that strong foundation didn't stay consistent. Let's talk about the TTK changes, because this is one of the biggest issues Battlefield 5 had during its life cycle. The developers adjusted the time to kill multiple times, not just to a light degree, fundamental changes that altered how gunfights played out. The intention was apparently to make the game more accessible, give players more time to react, make engagements less punishing, but the result was that it completely changed the feel of the gunplay, and players noticed immediately, because the original gunplay was one of the game's strongest, most beloved features, and suddenly it didn't feel the same. Gunfights didn't play out the same way, at the same tempo, the same pacing. What made it worse was the lack of clear communication. There were also changes to things like aim assist that weren't properly documented.
No, that's so bad! I can't believe that's in the game.
Adjustments that players could feel but couldn't clearly see explained. And when that happens, players lose confidence in the experience, because it feels like the rules are changing without warning. It feels like the game isn't being catered to them, it's being altered on the fly to be easier for new players. And remember, this didn't just happen once, it happened multiple times. The game would move in one direction, then shift back, then adjust again, and that inconsistency made it very difficult for Battlefield 5 to establish a clear identity. Was it trying to be a more skill-based Battlefield, or was it a more accessible one? It kept moving between those two ideas, and never fully committed. How can you expect your player base to stay invested for the long term when the game itself keeps changing the rules, keeps changing the gameplay, the outcome, the basic experience of playing, and doesn't even fully communicate it consistently? And this is where a lot of players dropped off. The game, for all its flaws, had potential, but it didn't feel stable for the players. Investing time and money into a game where you lose more trust the longer you engage with it isn't an encouraging scenario for continued success. This issue, along with many smaller but impactful ones, such as visibility problems, cheating, a stagnant meta, MMGs at one point destroying gameplay flow by allowing or even forcing players to lie still and mow people down from easily sourced on Steam locations. This all came together to create negative sentiment that ebbed and flowed as the game's life passed by. But on the horizon came a turning point, and this is where you need to stay with the story, as Battlefield 5's legacy genuinely has this many rises and falls. Battlefield 5 starts to become something else, but in a positive way, because over time, it actually started to improve, genuinely improve. Updates became more meaningful, content started to land better, and the overall experience began to feel more cohesive. It took a long time. Games shouldn't be releasing and then requiring weeks, months, or even years to get to a solid state, but regardless, improvement was eventually undeniable. The real, most commonly agreed upon positive shift came here, the Pacific expansion. This was not just an update, this was Battlefield 5 finally showing what it was supposed to be, what so many players initially thought BF5 would be from the start. The Pacific maps were some of the best in the game, depending upon your personal tastes. Iwo Jima, Pacific Storm, Wake Island, and it didn't matter if you personally connected with all of them, player sentiment was clear. This is what we've been waiting for. We are finally getting somewhere. A true Battlefield experience really can be possible with BF5. And the maps didn't just look great, they played well, but with variety. So for example, if you hated Iwo Jima, you had Pacific Storm. This wasn't just 3 huge open maps, something that BF5 had received so much criticism for. And it wasn't 3 meat grinder experiences either. It was a mix of solid work for different playstyles. You had clear front lines, stronger vehicle and infantry balance, or at least an attempt to integrate the two better, and that classic Battlefield chaos that feels unpredictable but controlled at the same time. This is where the game finally felt aligned. This was actually Battlefield, where the movement, the gunplay, the map design all started working together. And this is the version of Battlefield 5 that people remember when they defend it today. But it didn't stop there, because the Pacific expansion also brought something else back, something Battlefield 5 had been missing: atmosphere, visuals, and feeling. The sound design, the scale, the sense that you were part of something bigger than just your immediate fight. And for the first time since launch, Battlefield 5 felt like it had a clear direction. This is where the story should have continued. This is where the game should have built momentum. This is where it should have been expanded. This should have been another incredible turnaround for DICE, as they had miraculously achieved with Battlefield 4. More theatres of war, more maps, better refinement, and a focus on iteration upon what is clearly working. Instead, it stopped. Content support was abruptly cut. with Battlefield 2042 now the focus. No major continuation of that Pacific direction, no extended life cycle, the death of any real chance to build on what had just started working. And that's the part that still frustrates players, because Battlefield 5 didn't fail at that point. It was improving, it had seemingly finally found its identity, and then it was abandoned. What makes that even worse is what came next, because after that support ended, Battlefield players were left waiting for roughly a year with no new Battlefield experience. DICE bundled their unreleased assets together, dropped them into the game, and then the player base just waited until the release of Battlefield 2042. And that's when perception really started to shift, because Battlefield 2042 didn't just fail to build on BF5, it made people reassess BF5. Suddenly, Battlefield 5 didn't feel like the problem. It felt like the missed opportunity, because even with its issues, it had systems that worked. Movement, gunplay, a semblance of squad play. Things that 2042 struggled to deliver at launch, to put it mildly. With no real clear cohesive direction, complaints about mouse and controller inputs, and honestly, a whole raft of other issues. A familiar pattern was clearly forming. Every time a new Battlefield releases, players look back at the previous one, or ones, differently. We're seeing that again now with Battlefield 6. Some players prefer Battlefield 5, some don't, and yes, there is always an element of rose-tinted glasses that happens in every franchise, but even when you account for that, there's still something important here, because Battlefield 5, at its best, was doing things very well, not perfectly, but well enough to build upon, and that is the key difference. It had a foundation that could have led to something great if it had been given more time. Instead, what we got was a game that spent too long trying to figure itself out, and not enough time finishing the job. And that's why Battlefield 5 is so difficult to define, because rather than just one experience, it's multiple versions of itself. The broken launch, the inconsistent middle, the strong final phase, then the disappointing void of unfulfilled promise. And depending on when you played it, that's probably the version you remember. So was Battlefield 5 a bad game? Not as such, at least not in that simplistic sense. Was it a great game? No, it wasn't, not for 99% of players it seems. But was it a game that had the potential to be great? Yeah, I really do think so. It never really got close to it, but it did get close enough to confirm it was worth being disappointed that it never got there. And that is why people still talk about it. It sticks with you. You remember the moments where it worked, the glimpses of what it was becoming, and you can't help but think, what if it had just kept going? But I want to know what you think about this. When did you play BF5? At launch, during the updates, or later when everything had settled? Do you think it was underrated, or did it deserve the criticism it got? Before you go, make sure you check out today's sponsor, War Thunder. Blow up some tanks for me, play the game for free on PC, PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile devices using my links in the pinned comment or video description. Those of you who haven't played War Thunder yet, or are returning after a break of at least 6 months, will receive a massive bonus pack on PC and consoles, including those premium vehicles, 100,000 silver lions, and 7 days of premium account. So enjoy. And if you enjoy Battlefield content like this, subscribe. We're getting closer to 100k subs. YouTube is going to suggest another video of mine to you it thinks you'll like, and I'll see you over there.